All right, in the bullpen today, we have Ms. Lauren Chen, host of Media Holic and Pseudo Intellectual on Blaze TV, TPUSA contributor. And we're going to talk about, well, the 11th Circuit and the ruling about the Fearless Fund, Black women who they have a venture capital organization, a fund that gives money to Black women. Well, the court said, well, that's discrimination. All right, we'll talk about it. Welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. All right, I don't want to assume what you know or believe about this particular ruling. So if you would give us your opinion, I would then opine.
Sure. Well, if you ask me, there are two different issues here. First off, there's the question of whether the Fearless Fund should be able legally to give grants specifically to only Black women. And then there's the question of whether it is morally right for them to do so. This may surprise you, but when it comes to the issue of whether they legally should be able to award grants solely to Black woman-owned businesses, I actually believe they should legally be able to do that. If it's, from what I understand, a completely private fund, there's no government taxpayer money into this. I don't think there's anything wrong with an individual group or just private people saying they wish to put their money toward a certain cause. I think that's perfectly acceptable. Whether it's morally right for them to do so, that I think you and I will likely disagree with. As someone who is, I'm half Chinese and I am a woman, I would much rather support a business that actually shares my values in terms of, maybe being a Christian or socially conservative, rather than be concerned about things like skin color or gender. So there's two different topics, if you ask me, and I would love to hear what you think of both of them.
That's really ironic. So let's parse. Okay, so you make the legal argument, which I assume is also the constitutional argument, that this is likely going to be overturned, and I can give you some case law and also cite another constitutional dynamic, the Civil Rights Act, which is likely going to be used to overturn this. But you don't have an issue per se with the legal part or the constitutional part. You think as long as they are independent, they operate as an autonomous group, and they have these provisions, you're saying, yes, they can do this, and it is codified in law and constitution. Am I correct on that summary?
Well, I believe in freedom of association. So I don't think it's necessarily the government's place to say that as an individual or as a private group that we should be able to, not make distinctions as to who to give our money to. I don't think that's morally. I don't think that should be legally how we conduct ourselves in America. And this doesn't just extend to specifically the Fearless Fund. There are other cases where maybe we can look at the baker from Colorado. I don't believe the government should be saying you should give your services to this person versus not this person, or that you should not be able to. So I would actually say that I'm not sure if this is going to be overturned, but in my opinion, it should be legally allowed for them to do this.
Okay. So you just said you believe in freedom of association. Freedom of association is not a legal doctrine. It is actually a moral standing and societal construct. Freedom of association is what allows for churches to legally discriminate against individuals who are, let's say, in a same-sex relationship or perhaps in a relationship that is in disagreement with their doctrine in their church. So they can legally discriminate and say no to you when it comes to marriage and other sacraments of the church. So freedom of association is a moral construct, okay? So if you believe that this is legally acceptable because of your ideological belief of freedom of association, how does your ideological belief not equate to the moral belief that this same freedom should express itself in appropriate ways morally as well? How do you say legally is freedom of association that you agree with, but then say, well, but that freedom of association becomes immoral outside of the legal context?
Well, this is the same question of freedom of speech. I can support someone's freedom to say something, to express an opinion without necessarily agreeing with that opinion itself. Similarly, I think I should be able to support the ability of this venture capitalist fund to be able to give grants based on certain immutable characteristics. I should say that I support their legal right to do so, while simultaneously saying, but I don't think they should be doing that. There's a difference between being able to do something and me supporting the fact that they were doing it. And I think freedom of speech is the best example of the similarities that I can think of.
Okay, but you will support them anyway. With millions watching and many people benefiting from this program called Indisputable, we just need 1% of the viewers to become a paid member so we can continue to bring this content to you. Now back to the show.
You mean support them legally?
Well, financially.
Their ability to do that, or the morality?
Well, you would not give them money. You're not a supporter. You would not be a supporter of this organization.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
But in the legal framework, you say, well, it may be legal what they're doing. So this court got it wrong, perhaps. I believe they got it wrong significantly.
Well, I'm not actually sure if they did get it in terms of how the law is currently. You probably know better than me. I'm not sure if that is something that the court will overturn.
Well,
from what I
understand, do you think they got it right? What make the other argument? Where do you think they possibly got it right? The 11th Circuit.
The 11th Circuit. Well, I mean, if we look at the ways that the Civil Rights Act has been enforced right now, I know we similarly have in Sheets, there's this gas station that is actually being taken to court by the feds because they have a system in place to weed out applicants who basically have criminal backgrounds. Now, the feds, from what I understand, are saying that even if there was no racist intent behind the application of the system, the fact that it is leading to disparities in the applicants that they're choosing, that in and of itself is enough to violate the Civil Rights Act. If that is the standard that we have right now, then it's hard for me to look at something like the Fearless Fund that objectively just straight out says we are only accepting applicants who are Black and female. That seems to be way more discriminatory than anything Sheets has done currently, and the feds are taking them to court.
You're conflating some dynamics that do not coexist, and so let me provide some remedy to that. The court case that was filed against the Fearless Fund they did not make the argument of the more understood and contextualized Civil Rights Act. They utilized the argument of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Are you familiar with the Civil Rights Act of 1866?
Yes.
Explain it to me.
Well, from what I understand, it prohibits the discrimination based on racial characteristics in employment, and obviously having something open specifically to Black females. And from what I understand, it wasn't even the female aspect of it, but it was solely the racial aspect of it. Well, I haven't heard people make complain about the woman aspect.
That's actually not correct. So the judge in the summary judgment, in the summary after the judgment, said basically this is a contracting issue. You see, there's a 1-2 play, Ms. Chen, and I want you to see it. They utilized an antiquated 1866 law that was passed in order to protect Black people against discrimination, launched primarily by those who were in the KKK and those that sympathize with that organization, with that gang. So this terrorist group, the KKK, they would engage in these kinds of professional, meaning in the workplace, discrimination, active, and also in public arenas, meaning working for government. So 1866 was the Civil Rights Act that addressed both. It said this applies to private citizens and this applies to public as well. Now, when you get into your Civil Rights Act, for example, 1981 and beyond, these sets of laws primarily dealt with the public, primarily dealt with public accommodations of the historically disenfranchised. But the reason why the judge said that the Fearless Fund could not operate under these terms is because it violates the contracting law codified inside of the 1866 Civil Rights Act. What the Civil Rights Act basically says, Ms. Chen, of 1866 is that you can't discriminate against Black people because they are Black when it comes to equitable contracting, okay? Now, contracting in law, that means that we have a negotiated principle, there's an exchange of value, there's an invitation to contract. All of these things have to take place in order for it to be what's called in the four corners of the contract. So this judge said, well, it violates contracting since others are not allowed to contract with you. So that meant the judge made a stretch and said he's going to look at charitable contributions as a contract. which by the way is the first ruling of its kind. It's unprecedented because the court has routinely distinguished that nonprofit organizations have the right of equitable remedy to address social dynamics inside of the local communities. And just because you have created a program that has a narrow focus in order to bring a certain population out of, well, let's just say economic disadvantage, because less than 1% of Black women have had access to venture capital funding. They're addressing a real problem, right? So the judge decides to make the ruling based on contracting. It's not gender, it's not race, it's even sillier than that. He's saying that, well, everybody should be able to contract with this nonprofit. Now you gotta say, Ms. Chen, that sounds silly as hell, does it not?
Well, yes, I've already expressed that I don't support any type of government entity or ruling coming in and saying whether that's through contracting, whether that's even with hiring, what a private organization can or cannot do. So if I support this ruling, I will state clearly that I absolutely do not.
Well, so you morally are okay with the Fearless Fund doing what they're doing in order to lift a particular demographic that has been historically marginalized aside of the ranks of business and entrepreneurship.
That is a different question. Once again, I will affirm that I support the legal ability of the Fearless Fund as a private organization to conduct themselves however they best see fit. If you're asking me whether I support the moral mission of what they are doing, specifically saying we are only going to be giving grants to businesses that are owned by Black women, that's something different entirely, and that I do not support. I do not support treating people differently based on skin color, and I understand your perspective that it's to right a historical wrong, but I don't see how continuing discrimination achieves that goal. If there is actual current discrimination, I say we start by eliminating that.
You know, it's really interesting. You agree that in the case that dealt with Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado, who did you side with in that case?
The cake baker.
So the cake baker has the authority to discriminate.
Yes, and I believe Fearless Fund should have the authority, the ability to discriminate. That doesn't mean that I agree with what they are doing. Again, I can support someone's freedom of speech to say something without agreeing with what they're specifically saying.
Okay, do you agree morally that Masterpiece Cake Shop should have the ability, the right to discriminate?
When it comes to what was going on with the cake specifically, the fact that it wasn't simply that he was refusing to serve a gay customer, it was that he was refusing to bake a cake for a specific event, a gay wedding. That I do support him morally in saying, no, I actually do not want to be part of this celebration that violates my religious conviction. If he had simply looked at a gay person and said, I don't want to serve you a pre-baked cake as I am doing for all of these other customers, I actually would not support him doing that. I believe that gay people should be able to buy my cakes if I'm a baker like anyone else. But when you're talking about commissioning a specific cake for an event, that is a different question. I do support him morally in what he chose to do.
I find that argument quite interesting, and here's why. One of the caveats, nuances to that particular case was the fact that this was a business inside of a business community that was open to the public. This was not a cake shop inside of somebody's home. And because it was open to the public, the sentiment was that you have to engage in what's called public accommodations here. And public accommodations, because you have a facility that's open to the public, is warranted for everyone because that company benefits from the taxpayers in that community. If somebody breaks into that store, there's an emergency service that comes to attempt to protect and then investigate. Well, who pays the taxes? Well, the people do. So the people are paying the taxes. You get to now auto-discriminate against individuals who are helping to undergird your business. So that's morally incomprehensible to me. But let's go back.
But you're not just, but sorry, I'll just stop you there. But once again, the question for the baker specifically wasn't whether he was discriminating against a customer. We have a bunch of cupcakes that are already baked. I am simply refusing to sell them to you specifically because you are a gay man and I don't want your business. That is not what happened. There was this couple that specifically wanted to commission a cake for a gay wedding. Do you believe that a Black baker should be compelled compelled to take a commission from the KKK celebrating, perhaps an infamous lynching? Do you think that a black baker should be compelled to take that contract?
No,
that's a better comparison.
Well, I have a better comparison than your better comparison. You see, the KKK are not part of a constitutionally protected class. Black people are. So are members of the LGBTQ community by statute, by constitution, and by case law. They are part of a protected class. KKK members, madam, are not. They are a hate group and a terrorist organization. You see the difference?
Right, but you can be gay but not have a gay wedding, right? There's a difference there. Once more, like it's not necessarily the fact that these people were gay. It's not that the baker was turning down a commission to make a birthday cake for a gay individual. This was specifically for a gay wedding.
A gay wedding. Okay. All right. Morally, less than 1% of Black women have been allowed to access venture capital. So Black women create an organization for Black women to raise the consciousness and cash so we can have Black women with access to venture capital. You're saying that's immoral, man, right?
Right. Well, I'm saying that if I'm an investor, the main criteria that I would be looking for would not be whether someone was a woman or Black. And I think you say that less than 1% of Black women have been allowed to apply for venture capital funds. That's not correct. Anyone can apply for anything. I believe you mean less than 1% have been granted.
That over here, madam. Less than 1% of Black women have had access to capital venture funding. Please.
Right. That's a better way to phrase it. It's not that people are not allowed to apply. Anyone's allowed to apply. Whether they are granted it is a different thing.
Are you listening, madam? They don't have access to it. They're smart. They're the most educated demographic, rising up faster than anyone else in America. They are the most educated with entrepreneurship, rising up faster than any other demographic in America. You're telling me they don't know what to do with money? So who corrects the system? Who corrects it? Government isn't correcting it. You don't even like government correcting it. So who corrects the system?
So when you say that Black women are the most educated class in America,
I'm going to ask you,
to be clear,
madam, they are the fastest growing education subgroup in the United States of America. You can argue and debate that on Pew Research all day, madam. You can look that up after the show. The primary,
right? But they're not the most educated group in America.
Madam, they are the fastest growing educated group having master degrees or beyond in the United States of America. Why does that make
right? Fastest growing is not the same thing as saying that they are overall the most educated group in America.
But I didn't say the most educated, madam. They are the most educated by way of fastest growing in the United States. But
yes, but those are two very different things, right? My toddler's vocabulary is growing faster than mine is, but she doesn't have a bigger overall vocabulary than I do.
That's amazing.
Those are different things.
That's amazing to me. So I name a positive about Black women who have been historically marginalized against, kind of like Chinese people too, in this country. Remember the Chinese Exclusion Act, the federal law that excluded Chinese people from even traveling to the United States of America? I'm sure you
and now Chinese Americans are one of the highest earning and actually most educated groups. This is amazing. I want all the best for Black women, but I think we need to be very clear with our words here.
I'm going to say it again. Black women are the fastest growing demographic in the United States of America for advanced degrees and beyond. Black women are the fastest growing demographic for entrepreneurship in the United States of America. Those are positives because they have been intentionally discriminated against and having access to these programs. So Black women got together and did something about it. But to you, when you utilize education as a proxy to believe that you're smarter than most, I have multiple advanced degrees. I've been a professor since 2016. That don't make you a damn thing. That makes you.
I would be the last person to conflate having degrees with intelligence. That's absolutely not what I mean. I'm just meaning to draw a distinction between fastest growing in education versus being the most educated. And the reason why that distinction matters is because
I just told you most. You keep on going back to that. I'm telling you, most fastest growing in that class of most educated for graduate degrees and beyond fastest growing demographic. It's simple. That's not complex to understand.
No, it's definitely not. But that's not what you said initially. And the reason why I make that distinction is because if you say blanket that Black women are the most educated group, which again is not the case, but yet only 1% of them have been given access to venture capital funds.
How do you define it?
I suppose having some sort of certificate of completion from an institution.
Formal education, correct?
Yes, formal education for the purposes of this conversation.
Got you. And how much formal education do you have?
I am a Joe Blow, a poli-sci BA.
Okay. You don't have an advanced degree?
No.
All right. I appreciate you being on the show. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.